Oh, you're so sweet.
Lisa, let me know when you're ready. I know that you had short time to transition between meetings, but you tell me when you're ready to go.
Sounds great. Just about. Just one quick second here.
Okay.
All right, Gwen, we're all ready to go.
Thank you so much. All right, it is June 23rd, 2021, and I will call the Administration and Finance Committee of the Missoula City Council to order. We're nearing the end phase of our virtual meetings, but we're still virtual. So if any of the public wants to comment, they can go to the city website, to the agendas, and click on the link to join as an attendee. You can also always email council at council@ci.missoula.mt.us. So feel free to contact us with public comment. Lisa, could you do a roll call vote?
I sure can.
Well, sorry, it's not a vote. It's just a roll call. What am I? A little early this morning. Thanks.
It's early in the morning. No worries. Okay, Stacy Anderson. Let's see. Looks like Stacy's not here yet. All right. Mirta Becerra. No Mirta. John Contos.
Here.
Heather Harp.
She is gone this week.
All right. Jordan Hess. Okay, I see Jordan on the list.
I think he'll be joining. He was toggling between meetings.
Oh, sounds good. It looks like he's on mute. Gwen Jones.
Present.
Julie Merritt.
Present.
Jesse Ramos. Looks like Jesse's gone. Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
Present.
Brian Von Lossberg.
Here.
Heidi West.
Present.
All right, so that looks like we have 8 members present, 4 absent as of right now.
Okay, and I'm not sure that Jordan is present, but I believe he will be joining. So either way, we do have a quorum, which is good because we have an action item later. All right, we have minutes from the June 16th, 2021 meeting. Were there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved, and I will call for public comment on items not on the agenda. If you want to provide public comment, please raise your hand, which I believe is *9, and we'll call on you. But I'm not seeing any attendees raise their hand, so we'll go on with the meeting. We have one item today that is an action item, and I'm excited about it. We have been talking for several years now about the federal building downtown, which previously housed the Forest Service and still houses the post office, as ultimately being a hub for local government. We've talked about it for several years, and now we're moving into the phase of needing to really go forward with it by taking some initial council action. So that is what is before us today, and I believe we have John Adams here to present. There he is. Yes, take it away, John.
That's correct. I wanted to defer to the mayor if you wanted to offer any kind of introduction. If not, then I'll move forward with the technical presentation.
Great, thank you. Mayor Engen, did you want to comment at all?
No, I'm happy to let staff take this away. I think this is a remarkable and unique opportunity for us to not only meet the needs of both the city and county over the long term in terms of facilities, but also provide convenience for the residents we serve collectively, and also in the long run end up saving a ton of money to support those services in the space that we need. And on top of that, we're also preserving a pretty remarkable building that is a downtown icon, and should continue to serve the public in the way that it has for many, many years.
Great, thank you for that. And I'll let the record reflect that Mr. Hess is present, as is Ms. Becerra now. They've joined us. Okay, John, it's all yours.
All right. Well, my name is John Adams. I'm the city's Brownfields Administrator, in community planning, development, and innovation. And for the last 15 months or so, I've been the city's lead on the joint city-county task force to explore acquisition of the Missoula Federal Building. I wanted to, for anybody out there who hasn't seen all the documents associated with this request, you can go to engagemissoula.com/federal-building, and all these documents that we're going to refer to today are available there. So I have kind of a fair warning, I have kind of a long presentation. And so I wanted to give you first the very brief synopsis, which is the city and the county are going to acquire the federal building where it goes to public auction. Staff propose joint ownership with Missoula County, roughly 50-50 building and cost split. We'll kind of navigate that as we work out an agreement, and it may fluctuate over time, but that's the basic story. Rehabilitation of the federal building would cost less than or the same as alternative space solutions. It would house the entire county administrative center and also the entire city downtown campus, except Missoula Police Department. And if all went according to plan, we'd occupy the building in late 2024. Because I'm going to go kind of long today, I wanted to offer you a wayfinding slide. This is kind of what I'm going to run through. First, talk about the federal building itself and the process for acquisition. I'm going to talk about our urgent city space needs. Talk about the results of due diligence on the federal building, alternative potential solutions to the city's space needs, council decisions today, and then I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dale Bickle, who's going to talk about potential funding mechanisms. So the federal building was constructed in 4 principal phases between 1911 and 1938, and the Italian Renaissance Revival style was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1979. It's got 3 stories above ground in a daylit basement. It's got approximately 120,000 usable square feet. It currently hosts the U.S. Postal Service. I think most of us know the downtown post office. It's been largely vacant. It's got a handful of federal employees right now, but besides the post office, it's been largely vacant since the Forest Service Region 1 moved out in 2015 after decades of continuous occupation. Federal building is important as a symbolic statement about the role and value of our government institutions and of our public lands because of its association with Region 1 and of Missoula's place as one disproportionately awesome part of the United States of America. As Jeremy Keene put it to me, it was important when it was built 100 years ago, and it's important today. Federal building's one of the 5 or 6 most important historic buildings downtown, along with, say, the Wilma, the Florence, Union Block, Courthouse, Montana Building, and Palace. Like, that's all I can come up with off of my head. Federal building occupies 2/3 of a city block, and it's shaped like a backwards G or a backwards C. From above, you can see the original building with what's now the post office and the former federal courthouse here in the southwest corner. The east addition, the greenhouse, we'll get a picture of that later. And the north addition, which is really built to house Region 1. You can get a sense here too of one of the great things about the building, which is it's built around these linear hallways. So it's really well designed for office space. That also presents challenges for other alternative uses. So for example, there's very limited depth anywhere in the building, except in that southwest corner, arguably right here on the north. So the building's historic importance is one reason why the downtown master plan supports city and county pursuit of the federal building. But from this screen cap, you can also get a sense of how it impacts downtown, just in terms of geography. If we proceed with acquisition, we'll ultimately see something on the order of 400 employees housed here, working downtown, going to lunch downtown, contributing to the economic and cultural vibrancy of downtown, all in a concentrated space right in the heart of the city. And occupying this space would free other spaces such as city council chambers, city hall, and the county administrative building for redevelopment for either public or private purposes. If we end up going down a different route, we're going to struggle to house all 225 or so city employees that we need to have downtown. So we'll have to start to look at other alternatives like pushing public works employees out to Scott Street, things like that. So 1 year ago, the federal government declared the federal building surplus to federal needs. And the city and Missoula County jointly declared our interest in acquiring the building, and we were the only party to express interest in the building. And what that means is that there's now a binary outcome for the federal building. Either the city and the county will acquire it, or it will go to public auction, where GSA is obliged to accept the high bid regardless of the origin or intentions of the high bidder. So if that happens, obviously the amount of control that we as a community have over the future of the building is extremely limited. But just to talk about that a little, it's not impossible that going to auction would yield a happy outcome for the federal building. But staff thinks bad things are more likely. And by that, I mean possibilities like extended vacancy or demolition by neglect or destruction of important historic elements of the building. We don't know what could happen to the building if it goes to auction. We'd prefer not to find out. It'd be extraordinarily difficult and expensive to adapt it to any other use than office space. So we're pretty skeptical that somebody else could come in, offer the money for it, and then rehabilitate it, maintaining its historic character and using it in a profitable way. When we expressed interest in acquiring the building, the city and county proposed to do so under the National Park Service Historic Surplus Property Program. So under this program, we'd receive the building for free. Essentially, we make a deal with GSA and the Park Service, GSA being General Services Administration. Pardon me. The deal is this: you give us the building and we'll preserve it in perpetuity. So if you have done or want to dig through our proposed application to the National Park Service, you can get a sense of how that works, which is that we'll preserve most of the remaining important historic elements of the building, like the post office lobby and the northwest entrance. And we'll restore some things like the historic circulation corridors and basement windows. And we'll continue into the future to work with the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office to ensure that any changes we make to the building are well considered. But we'll also have the latitude to do the things that we need to do to make the building functional, like ensuring that all our citizens can access the building with ADA entrances and creating a space with enough volume to accommodate public hearings. So the choice we face today is to either let the federal building go to auction or to apply to acquire the building. We've worked closely with National Park Service and GSA on this, and we have every reason to believe that our application would be approved. As part of the application, we agree that if it's approved, we'll accept the building. So I want to shift gears now and talk about the city's urgent space needs. As you can see on this slide, the city's population has nearly tripled since City Hall was built. And in a little over a decade, it will have doubled since City Hall's last expansion. And as the city increases in population and extent, the demand for government services also increases. We have more building permit requests, we have more streets to plow, we have more people that need access to social services, and we have more people invited to municipal court. So it's no surprise that we need more employees and more space to provide public service to a city of 75,000 than we do for a city of 30,000 or 43,000. While our population has grown, the city's worked hard to get the most out of City Hall. It's not an amazing building. It's not particularly well designed for today's uses, but we've held it together with baling wire, chewing gum, sent people to satellite offices, leased extra space, and done everything we can as an institution to get by without a major capital investment. But that balkanization of our offices has negative impacts. It silos employees so they don't collaborate as well as they need to. It creates redundant investments as you try to accommodate necessities at multiple locations. It makes public wayfinding and access challenging, and it really complicates security. And when we lease space, we don't make investments in things like sustainability that would otherwise be really sensible. So we've made this work as long as we can, but we now have an immediate need for one new courtroom, probably two in the near future. And we simply don't have enough space for all the people that need to be in City Hall. So at this point, doing nothing is not an option. We have some alternatives to pick from, and we'll explore those in a few minutes. There isn't any option that doesn't require additional space and cost money. Give you a sense of the scope of what we need. City staff and the due diligence design team, A&E Design, believe that in 2034, the community will need a city hall that's approximately 55,000 square feet. And that would provide for all the public services that we deliver and the staff that support them, with the exception of things like streets division and parks that are headquartered where their physical plants are, and the police department. We shot for the year 2034 because it was about as long a horizon as we felt like we could project with any real accuracy. And with the anticipation that if we rehab the federal building, we would move in late 2024. So one of the questions we asked about the federal building is, would this solve our space needs for at least a decade? And the answer is yes. So here's our wayfinding slide. We talked about federal building information and the process, our urgent city space needs. Now we're going to talk about due diligence on the federal building. So due diligence had a number of aspects, but at heart, it was about investigating the condition of the federal building so we could understand whether it's sound and what it would cost to both preserve it and make it functional, make sure we weren't getting a pig in a poke. Developing the preservation plan that we submit to the National Park Service and without which we can't contain the building. Consonant with that preservation plan, developing a site plan that provides proof of concept. Can the city and county jointly occupy this building and deliver the public services that Missoulians need and merit? And finally, what alternative space solutions, space needs are available to the city and the county? The good news is it's good bones. Federal building is mostly in good shape. It's structurally sound, built to last pretty indefinitely if taken care of. Well maintained by the federal government. Things that get extraordinarily expensive, like historic windows, are largely in good shape. It's a beauty. And like the exterior, the interior is solid. Particularly some historic portions of the interior are in good shape. That northwest entrance, many of us know from the Forest Service days. I see you, content analysis team. The doors to the old federal courtroom. There's the courtroom itself, a little bit of a Mona Lisa with a mustache. The third floor greenhouse that is not just urban myth. Condition is not perfect. The roof is within eyesight of needing replacement. There's water damage in the basement that we're going to need to solve. The facade, which is also the wall itself, is going to need some help. Got about $500,000 of asbestos and lead-based paint that need abated. There's plenty to be done to protect the historic resource and to make the building functional. And it's definitely not turnkey. To house a functioning local government, it'll need IT improvements, mechanical system improvements, the ADA entrances, ADA bathrooms, security controls, courtrooms, council hearing room, DCC hearing rooms. We'll need corridors, offices, public service desks. We'll need modest but better finishes. And we can't simply start packing up files and walking our stuff over. But what due diligence showed us is that the building would serve admirably as the center of local government. Those good bones make it amenable to rehabilitation. And we can fit all the services and support staff city and county need there. It'll be a space that enables us to provide better public service than we currently do, And here you can see the departments that we currently envision being housed in the federal building. I think this co-location will help internally. I think it will help improve collaboration with the city and the county. And we think it'll be better for members of the public if, for example, development services on the city side and community and planning services on the county side are located down the hall or a floor apart from each other rather than in different parts of the downtown. To give you a sense of what we envision, these drawings are from A&E, our design team. What you can see in orange would be circulation space. What you see in purple would be public service or office space. White spaces are mechanical or exterior. The little red squares are columns. You'll want to notice that I'm going to give you all 4 floors, but for these 4 floors that I've rotated these so that Broadway's on the left side of the screen. So here you can see the post office lobby. And this is the interior courtyard. There's that northern bump out. Proposed alley access for automobiles, at least on the table. Here on the 2nd floor, you'll notice a proposal to create a BCC and chambers hearing room by expanding the former courtroom into the interior courtyard, into the interior light well on the south end of the building. As I noted earlier, the building doesn't have a ton of depth in any particular dimension. So A&E proposed this as an innovative way to get a column-free volume of space that can accommodate large public hearings. So the long and the short is that rehabbing the federal building would work, and it would work well. City and county could together rehabilitate and occupy the federal building, co-locating services and collaborating together, not just on the building, but across the many dimensions where collaboration between those 2 entities serves the public. But rehabilitation of the federal building is not the only way to solve city and county space needs. So as part of due diligence, A&E both estimated the cost of federal building rehabilitation and gamed out 3 other alternative ways to get the space we need. So we looked at 4 alternatives, which tried to solve for obtaining 55,000 square feet of office space each for the city and the county, and the cost of doing so through 2034. So the first alternative was designed as the least possible alternative. In this alternative, we would put 2 new courtrooms in City Hall because we know we need 1 new courtroom immediately, anticipate another within that time frame by 2034. And then we'd have to accommodate displaced employees, take care of immediate needs, and then the growth. So in order to do all those things, we'd lease downtown space. So this is essentially our null hypothesis. If we do the closest thing to nothing that we can imagine, how much does that cost? What does it get us? Second, we looked at renovating and expanding City Hall. In this alternative, we do something similar to alternative 1, where we add courtrooms, the courtrooms we need to City Hall. But instead of leasing to meet our space shortfall, we build an addition to City Hall. Third, we looked at building a new City Hall. We assumed site ownership. So we demolish an existing building like City Hall and build a new City Hall at the appropriate size and with contemporary public service design. And similarly, we looked at what it would cost Missoula County to build a new central services facility, the county administrative building, to replace the county administrative building and other satellite offices. And finally, we looked obviously at rehabilitating the federal building with Missoula County. And you can see here the estimated cost of those options. And that either building new or expanding City Hall are our most expensive options. Both the ad hoc leasing alternative and the federal building alternative clock in at approximately $20 million between the cost of rehabilitation and of lease space through 2034. And on the ad hoc side, about $7 million of that is lease. It's wasted money. These are the best estimates we could reasonably come up with, given limited information. And given that many of the choices that would decrease or increase the cost of any of these alternatives haven't been made. So we think they're good estimates, but we can't perfectly anticipate either how we'll navigate those choices that we need to make, or things like spikes in the cost of construction or lease space. We do think they're apples to apples. In other words, if they differ in the fact, it's unlikely that one option would emerge to be substantially more expensive and another substantially less so. We think this is a straight apples to apples. I want to note too that the estimate for the federal building is the one that is best developed. It's the one we had the best information for. And that we envision the federal building work being accomplished in at least 2 phases. So we think that it would cost approximately $30 million between the city and the county to get the building fully functional and ready to move in. That we would then need to do an additional $10 million of historic preservation work, replace the roof, probably do solar if we replace the roof, things like that over the next 10 years. So council's not being asked to agree to any particular expenditures today, but the reality is that choosing any of these alternatives, including the stand pat alternative, is going to imply expenditures down the road. So I tried to highlight a few of the criteria that we might consider in making this decision, and here's how I characterized some of those. Essentially, building new and rehabbing the federal building deliver the greatest benefits to the public. So in both of those options, we'd have better public service spaces and better things like daylighting, leading to fewer sick days and better employee retention. Both of those solutions also provide a very durable solution, one that we can envision lasting for scores of years. City Hall, in contrast, is not a forever building. It's not on its last legs, but it's also not built with the same quality or longevity with which the federal building was constructed. So investments there will not be as durable over the long term as either the federal building or new construction would be. And leasing, of course, is not a long-term solution. It's just fleeting. And of course, only one of these alternatives actually preserves the federal building. The others leave its future up in the air. I didn't include this on this chart, but one other consideration is simply the value of city and county assets. And basically, we have in front of us an option to about double our space portfolio and the value of downtown locally owned assets. Now we'll open up other options, like the sale or redevelopment of old City Hall and council chambers that would otherwise be impossible or expensive. Whether we use those for a public purpose, but don't have to buy a new site, whether we sell them for redevelopment, whatever we choose, we have new assets if we go this route, if we go the federal building route. So even though the direct cost of ad hoc leasing and federal building rehab are about the same, acquisition of the federal building creates opportunities for either revenue or foregone costs that are really valuable. Here, I just want to anticipate some of the most likely questions people will have about this. First is just to reaffirm that when we acquire the federal building, we agree to preserve it in perpetuity. There's no wiggle room there. That's the deal. And we happily agree to that, right? Second, parking will be handled in the same way that it has always been managed for the city and the county, as well as for the federal building. For members of the public with a quick errand, and for visitors needing ADA parking, there will be dedicated short-term parking on adjacent streets. Visitors needing to stay longer will find on-street metered parking or on-street free parking or space in one of the 2 downtown parking structures, or come via public transportation 2 blocks away. And third, with respect to the post office, when GSA surplus the federal building, the U.S. Postal Service automatically initiated a process to evaluate its best options for leasing space for post office 59802. They lease from GSA. So with GSA turning over ownership, they need to explore what their lease options are elsewhere. The city and county strongly support a continued downtown post office, but the post office may identify a different downtown location it prefers, or the city and the county might, but we need to evaluate the best use of the federal building as a whole and understand what the best use of the entire space is. So we need to keep the post office downtown. Whether that office will be in the federal building depends on independent evaluation by and discussion between the Postal Service and local government. Regardless of whether the post office remains in place, city and county will retain significant historic elements of post office lobby. That's part of our preservation plan. With regard to the future of City Hall and council chambers, if we move forward with the federal building, then immediately we'll start working with the community to figure out the best use of those buildings. Without knowing what other ideas might emerge, council chambers seems ripe for sale, but City Hall is more up in the air. And relatedly, just a reminder that the police department is completing its own space needs analysis. We know their needs are acute, but one shortcoming in the federal building is it simply doesn't accommodate the Missoula Police Department very well. Because of the way it blocks circulation, because of the lack of street access and parking, it's a really challenging space for MPD. We gamed it out. It's not good. So here's our wayfinding slide again. We walked through federal information and building information and process, space needs, due diligence, alternative solutions. Now I want to talk briefly about the decisions before council today. So the resolution that is before council to authorize the mayor to apply to the National Park Service and do whatever else is necessary to acquire the building, pardon me, is built on a template that National Park Service and GSA require. Basically, they want us to commit to taking the building. They want to know whether we're going to take it or it's going to go to auction. So that application commits us to accept the building if NPS and GSA approve our application. If we apply, our application will almost certainly be approved. We've worked with the feds on a draft application. They've reviewed a draft preservation plan. It could require some minor modifications, but there's not a lot of uncertainty here. The proposed MOU stems from the fact that GSA requires a single applicant at this time and will turn title of the building over to only a single entity. So the city and county agreed that the city would be the interim applicant because we're up against the GSA disposal deadline. They need us to apply now. But that we'll continue the work we've started together to create a single entity that can jointly finance, manage, and own the building. So for example, one possibility with a lot of potential would be to create a special district that encompasses only the federal building property. So the MOU is an acknowledgement that this is a joint venture, an agreement to develop the instrument that manifests joint ownership in a single entity. And I want to note here that everything we've done on the federal building to date has been done jointly with Missoula County. It's been a great collaboration. And the reason we collectively gravitated toward it is one, the building is just too big for either entity to take on by itself. And two, because we share a vision of co-locating public services and staff so that we can better serve the people of the city and the county. The two entities have worked really well together and we look forward to continuing that collaboration. And with that, we're going to turn now to CAO Dale Pickle to discuss how financing might work should council elect to move forward with the federal building.
Thank you, John. Really nice presentation. So how we're approaching this is like we do a lot of our complicated projects is a basket of tools. And on the slide in front of you are some of the things that are under consideration. And as we go through this year's budget process, you will see capital improvement requests that will start laying out our financial plans for the federal building. But there are a number of things that we would use to fund the renovations of the facility. First of which on the list is just sale of assets. So I've listed here, sale of City Hall and sale of council chambers. Those are all assets that are that we currently own and that we contemplate being able to divest of for other development purposes. We have opinions of value on those totaling about $10 million between the two, should that be able to occur. We have opportunities for federal grants. John mentioned some of the environmental abatement that we have to consider. I think there may be grant opportunities for that. We're spending money on space now, so we would reclassify those expenses into funding necessary for the facility itself. There are some eligible components in ARPA that we could allocate to this facility, and we would consider that in this year's and next year's budget process. Then we also have the opportunity to expand one of the downtown urban renewal districts, and that would be a consideration that council could make, and a joint building of the city and county would qualify as public infrastructure under Montana law. And then finally, we do have the ability to issue bonds to do this. We have an ability to limited obligation bonds. It is limited on how much we can issue bonds for, but that could be a portion of this as well. So we have all kinds of opportunities to fund this building, and also we have what you've seen here is in this presentation is kind of, I won't even call it conceptual design yet related to this building after our due diligence process. I think we have a great opportunity here. But we do, these estimates that John has presented does include a 25% contingency. The city and county envision bringing on a general contractor should we move forward with this, and to have them at the table during the construction process, and we can value engineer as we go as well. So we have all kinds of opportunities. Oh, and one final thing, John did mention sustainability, and I think that both city and county have sustainability goals that we would like to be able to invest in this building. Our energy performance contractor, McKinstry, we've had conversations with them, and that's also a potential financing sources to be able to use energy performance contracts. Even though we haven't occupied the building, they have a history with it, and I think we do have the opportunity to create an energy performance contract for the facility. So I will stop there, John.
Great. John, did you have any further comments?
I do not.
Okay, great. Thank you to both of you. This is a great presentation, and it's just such a great topic. I have been excited to have this come to this committee. Several things. First, I want to just have a good, robust discussion regarding this first with questions prior to getting to any type of motion. So let's hold off on a motion for now and just entertain questions. And secondly, I just wanted to say this is just such a win-win-win on all levels, but to have an opportunity to have basically a half a city block with an incredible building with huge potential gifted to us is at this time in Missoula's growth, there's just so many converging things coming together at once that are amazing. So, but lots of information to discuss. I'm going to start with, oh, and also first, Lisa, if you will note that Jordan Hess is here and Stacy Anderson, I think that will bring us up to date on attendance. They joined quite a while ago. Okay, Ms. Vasika.
Thank you. That was a very informative presentation. I really appreciate all the rest that you presented as well. So I'm curious, I have two questions. So what will the total rehabilitation cost be? I know that there was $500,000 in asbestos alone. So I just want to know what the total rehabilitation cost would be. And then what would the yearly maintenance cost be to the city as well?
So the total rehabilitation cost for the building over 12 years, we estimate to be $40 million split with the county. So $20 million for each entity. We don't have a good guess on O&M yet. It's going to depend to some extent on the choices that we make as we rehabilitate the building. So we could use some industry rules of thumb, but we don't have good data. We're pretty sure it's going to be less than we spend on things like City Hall right now and our lease spaces because they're simply inferior spaces and inferior construction, and because we'll have redone things in the way we want them in the federal building.
Thank you. And may I have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So I know that Mr. Bickle mentioned a bunch of different ways that we can fund this. How are we going to decide how we fund this? Will it be up to a council vote, or will city administrators just decide?
Dale?
It will be part of the budget process throughout the program. So we'll look at during this year's budget process, we'll have our first capital improvement program related to this, and that will include really the short-term expenses related to continued design and those further types of investigation and getting us to a building permit, because it would be good for us to be under construction as soon as we can get a conveyance, hopefully in September of 22, and then we can start some renovations. And then and also the important thing about that is, as I mentioned earlier, the costs include significant contingencies, and we need to really get to conceptual design, a 30% design, and really start looking at what we need to do. As John mentioned, the building is in good shape. These numbers represent a lot of finishes, lots of changes to finishes to make it operational. So, I mean, it's in good shape, but it's tired. So those are the things that we're looking to do. But all of the expenses will have to be approved by council through the budget process.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Von Lossberg.
God, it's too tempting to take Dale's comment about in good shape but tired. But I won't go down that path. I don't have really, I have one question, so you can come back to me afterwards. I was hoping that either John or Dale could speak maybe one more level in depth to the energy performance contracting opportunity there. I'm certainly familiar with it, but could maybe one of you speak to what we are doing at City Hall, for instance, and how would that translate into a revenue stream potentially at the federal building?
Yeah, I can do that. So, and I'll describe what we're doing on energy performance contracting. So after the results of a request for proposals, the city engaged McKinstry, national engineering firm with a local office that does these energy performance contracts. And what the concept is that we're undergoing an investment grade audit, it's called right now, to understand all of our energy use systems. And what they will do is propose changes to the systems that demonstrate a return on an investment and demonstrates a payback. And so and an energy performance contract is that city, you make these improvements and we will guarantee you the savings that funds the debt service. And so we can, based on the life of an underlying financing and the life of the improvements that we're doing. So we're looking at various facilities now, lighting in parking structures, parks facilities, aquatics, fire stations. We left City Hall off of it right now because of this process. We didn't want to invest a bunch of, essentially millions of dollars necessary in upgrades in City Hall if we weren't going to be permanent tenants. But there are a lot of those coming. In fact, I think we will, in the next couple of months, hopefully an energy performance contract is going to be coming before City Council for approval. And then transitioning out to the federal building, they have a history. McKinstry has done work for the federal government at the federal building. They understand the systems. And I think we have the ability to get baseline data that they could use to develop an energy performance contract for the city and county.
Thanks.
Mr. Hess.
Thanks. This is really exciting. I've been aware of this for a long time, and I'm really glad that we're getting to this point. And I want to thank John for all of your work and due diligence to date. I really am excited about the way this is proceeding. I got the opportunity to tour the federal building, I guess last year, and just got even more excited with that opportunity. I do have several questions. I guess first of all, has the National Park Service provided any comment informally about the MOU and whether or not they are applying as the city and creating a jointly owned entity down the road is acceptable to them?
Yeah, we've been in communication with NPS and GSA, the city and county attorney's offices. We think that we have conceptual buy-in from the National Park Service and the GSA. They understand and have understood from the beginning that we want to end up owning the facility jointly. So we've got to finesse it. We've got to make sure it meets everybody's needs, but it's doable. Like, we have conceptual buy-in from both those agencies.
Okay, great. Can you talk about opportunities for public involvement, either before or during the acquisition, and process, whether it's public or internal, for determining how we make space decisions and renovation decisions?
Dale, I might defer to you on that with your expertise.
I'm sorry, Jordan, could you please repeat that?
Yeah, Dale, I was wondering if you could talk about the process, the engagement process that the city envisions for engaging the public as well as engaging internal stakeholders for making decisions about renovation.
Yeah, you bet, Jordan. Thanks. Great question. So one, I want to again highlight the Engage Missoula page now. So we have, through this process, that will be our primary instrument to keep the public notified and ability to comment on that, along with our traditional public meetings tools. And we've really got a stout Engage page up now with lots of documents on there. And I think what we envision doing related to the design of the building is using, I think what statute calls an alternative delivery system, but essentially a CMAR, construction manager at risk process, where we go through a procurement process at the start. As soon as we start getting into design after this process, we would do that and get a general contractor on board. And what that helps with is, I think we often do what you see is when we go out for a bid. And then, if estimates come out higher, then we're doing the value engineering to see what we can change. This is when we're just doing it right at the start, and we're working with the design team and the contractors right together, so we have really fast estimates and just alternative ways of thinking of way to construct. So it's when I was at Missoula County, we used that in the courthouse renovation project, and it was really valuable. We also did it on Fort Missoula Regional Park, and that one was where we built that in 2019 on 2010 costs, and value engineering made that happen. So very effective tool.
Great, thank you.
Is that everything, Jordan?
I have more, but maybe I'll let someone else have a turn.
Okay, Ms. Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate the very thorough presentation. I think this is a great opportunity, and I love the fact that it will include historic preservation of what I think is a really beautiful building downtown. I think that my question has been answered, but maybe I'll ask it just to make sure. So, John, I saw, to be sure I understand it, I saw that the estimates that you'd given with the 20 million from the city, the 20 million from the county for rehabilitation. And my question was going to be whether that included energy conservation upgrades. But listening to Dale, can you, I guess, speak to that a little bit, what that number is and how the energy performance contracts would reflect? I'm not sure how those numbers work together. So if one of you could speak to that, that would be great.
Yeah, we don't have specific numbers as of yet, because what it depends on really is the level of investment related to what we would do with energy systems at the federal building. So, so how those energy performance contracts works, it's a measure of the savings in both energy and in maintenance. And they will guarantee, an energy performance contract will guarantee those savings for that, but the design process really has to inform what that looks like. So, either that design process or an investment grade audit would be able to do that. And depending on the type of systems we put in, it really depends on what that payback would be. That would be eligible for a energy performance contract.
And just to expand a little bit, Amber, on the estimate included some pretty substantial investments in energy conservation, so new HVAC and so forth. And I didn't have to double check my notes, but I'm pretty positive we include solar because once we replace the roof, we're going to need to replace the roof, not immediately, but within that 10-year time frame. And once you replace the roof, there's an opportunity there that both the city and the county would want to take advantage of.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. I have a question, and then we'll circle back for some more questions. But it sounds like one of the challenges with this is having a space that will be appropriate for the Board of County Commissioners and City Council to have their large public meetings in. And there was a bit of a plan there, but I'm wondering if that can be addressed a little bit more. My understanding is this building is listed on the National Historic Building Registry. I don't know that I have the name there correct. But this, frankly, there'd have to be an expansion, I think, for chambers. And I see Mr. Filicetti is on the meeting, I assume, in his capacity as a historical architect. I just wonder what process, I know this is down in the weeds, but I am curious. I think after a year of being virtual, we're also excited to be back in person. And I'm curious about what that chamber would look like and basically what the process would be if there does have to be some kind of footprint expansion, if I'm reading that correctly.
So, yeah, Paul, I'm going to turn to you in a moment. But so for part of the process, we included this in our preservation plan that we've proposed to National Park Service and GSA. And National Park Service is, at least all indications are that they understand the need to do this. SHPO, City Historic Preservation Office as well, have all had an opportunity to look at that as a plan. It would expand our space. You'd take the federal courtroom, and then you'd expand into the window well, the light well that is in the interior court. It's kind of an interior courtyard on the southwest corner. So the southwest corner of the building has a first floor that's solid, and then it has an interior courtyard that is empty space. And so we would expand into that so that you would take the old federal courtroom and then use the light well space as well to create that 3,000 square foot room, if I have that number right. So it's not the only possible solution, but it was the best that it's what we think right now is the best solution. And so we included it as part of our preservation plan. It's the kind of thing that National Park Service and SHPO will evaluate to see if we're doing damage to something particularly important and kind of navigate with us. They understand that we need to use the building, but they also, they're the guardians to make sure that we don't, that we preserve it as well. Paul, do you have any comment?
John, I think you summed it up great. That just to reiterate that concept and design that John just talked about, we did meet with NPS and GSA and talk to them about that, specifically NPS and SHPO, and walk through that. And they didn't have any significant objections. That would be appropriate to any of the modifications going on in the building in terms of the future use of the building, all that stuff, all those changes, if you will, or improvements that you make would all require NPS and SHPO to be involved at some level, depending on the impacts to the historic nature of the building. This didn't seem to be one that was going to be an issue for them.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the issue spotting in the application. I know it needs some navigation, but also, yeah, we just have to have a big room in which to have our big meetings. Mr. Von Lossberg, had you next.
No question. So if you want to go to Mr. Hess, I'm just
Jordan.
Yeah, thanks. Kind of a question and more of a request, I guess. The city, I believe now, is full owner of the Mountain Line Transfer Center, located on the City Hall block. And I just would request that we work with Mountain Line to not only figure out the ultimate disposition of that transfer center as this moves forward, but also to determine the best way to provide public transportation to this new government building, whether that includes moving the transfer facility to be closer to the new building, or whether it includes some kind of new routing. I think with several hundred employees coming to work in this building in a workforce that has a pretty good mode split and a pretty high transit utilization, I think that's going to be really important. So I guess just a request that we loop them in early and often.
Thank you. Mr. Von Lossberg.
It would be an honor to make both of the recommended motions. I know the first motion is the resolution, and the second motion relates to the proposed MOU. So I'd like to put those on the floor. And if it's okay with you, Gwen, I'd like to hold off on speaking to them. I certainly have some comments to make. I was hoping, I know that There's several members of the public in attendance, and I specifically saw Linda McCarthy and John Corwin from the Downtown Partnership. And I guess before speaking to it, I'd certainly be interested in public comment if there's no objection.
That is fine. That motion is in order, and we will take public comment at this point in time. Linda and John from Missoula Downtown Association, are you able to unmute yourself and speak? Oh, looks like you're in the meeting. Great.
Yes, hello everyone. How are you today? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So we are, as you might imagine, very supportive of this initiative. The opportunity to preserve a very valuable and beautiful building in the heart of the community is a wonderful thing. This is, as mentioned, part of the Downtown Master Plan and has been, from the very first day of day one. It's been challenging to have this building be vacant. I think we lost about 600 U.S. Forest Service employees when they moved services out of the building. So, to have a beautiful building renovated and lots of people there is great. More importantly, it's very good for downtown to keep government services in the core. Every downtown employee amounts to somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 of spending annually on average. Keeping government services in downtown is always a priority for a vibrant, healthy city center. Many of the other things that you've heard about, sustainability, energy efficiency, co-location, savings. I mean, wow, what an opportunity to acquire a building like this without having to actually buy it. I think it's a very good investment in our municipal services, a very good investment in this historical building and in multiple goals that are in the plan and in city and county government. John, do you have anything else you want to add?
I would just add that I concur with all of the comments, positive comments about the building, and specifically want to restate that it would be important to keep the post office downtown and for us to work in any direction possible to help that happen. Thank you.
And then, lastly, when you think about relocation out of the buildings that are currently occupied by both city and county government, there's a lot of opportunity there to help accomplish, some of the other goals in the master plan, especially related to, things like housing or incubation business or even parking. There is lots of opportunities to do parking development if that's a priority as well. So really thank and appreciate the work that's been done here and want you to know that you have our wholehearted support. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda and John. Any other public comment? If so, you need to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any. I would like to Dale and John probably can better answer this, just to follow up on an issue raised by Mr. Corwin regarding the post office. Can you address what possibilities there are with the post office staying at the at this building, if indeed the city and county move forward and do this whole process? How does that unfold with the post office?
John, do you want to, I think you had the most recent conversation, but you want to start?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's just, either way, it's just up in the air, council member. The Postal Service needs to figure out what their best option is. And then at the same time, the city and the county need to kind of navigate at least a little bit more design process to understand how entrances to the building would work, for example. And we need to, for the Post Service to remain in the building, we need to have a meeting of the minds on lease costs. So we need realistic and useful agreement on what an appropriate lease would be. there's possibility to keep them in the building, to keep them in their current location, or to help them find another location. It's just all up in the air. We'll just have to have continued discussions, presumably community discussion as well.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that our conceptual design now does contemplate having the post office in the federal building today. So it's just, but as we move down the design path, we understand things better. We'll see what that effect of not having them there is versus keeping them, and et cetera.
And so part of the equation is us wanting to keep them there and working out an agreeable lease agreement, but also the post office has to want to stay there, correct?
Yes.
So a lot of factors to address there.
Right.
Okay, we will go back to counselors. Mr. Von Losberg.
Thanks. First off, I want to thank John, Dale, Lee, the team from the county, the folks in the private sector that have assisted, historic preservation expertise in evaluating the options. A lot of work has gone into this, and I'm really grateful, John, for the detailed presentation. Anticipates a lot of questions, very thorough, as has always been the case, honestly, with your presentation. So thank you. Appreciate the folks from Downtown Partnership, Linda and John. I served on as council liaison to the Downtown Master Plan Committee. Gwen serves in that role now. This is something, as Linda mentioned, has been part of the plan for a long time. So not a new concept here. This is part of a very involved community planning process, and we're seeking to move forward on a big opportunity. I think it's important to be clear about what we're doing here. This is not every step in the process. It's what the motions speak to in terms of the opportunity with the building, and then the memorandum of understanding with the county. There's going to be a lot of other steps in this. A couple points of real resonance for me are the slide that John had up about the population growth in our community and municipal services associated with that. The opportunity from historic preservation part and the character of the community and what that building represents about the community's history and our move into the future. I can't begin to speak articulately enough to that. As is no surprise, I have a particular passion around sustainability and renewable energy and those opportunities, and appreciate the details about that opportunity moving forward. If this all works out going into the future, I intend to be a fierce advocate for aggressive work on that front. I think we need to walk the talk, and this is a great opportunity to do it with our own facilities. And we've heard comprehensive information about the space needs, and I think this is an elegant solution for the city and the county. And finally, this is a prudent financial move. John, I think was clear that doing nothing is not an option, and there's cost associated with no matter any path that we take moving forward. And I think it's clear that this is a fiscally prudent move as well. So honored to make the motion, honored to support it, proud that this is an opportunity within Ward 1, and I hope others will support it as well.
Thank you. Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. Also, I'm very supportive of this endeavor, and I want to thank all the staff that has dedicated so much time to ensure that we have all the information, anticipating questions. I'm sure we'll have more as the process evolves. I just want to reiterate what many have already stated. This is an incredible historic asset that we have in the community, and having the ability to retain it is incredibly valuable. Environmentally speaking, it's also another good way for us to go. But I also think that the vibrancy in downtown that this can bring is something that should be brought to the table as well. I think that having people, both city staff and those who seek city services coming to downtown adds to that special character of Missoula. So I definitely see this as a continued public investment in our downtown. And lastly, I just wanted to say that I've had the chance to talk to people who were former employees or who are still employees of the Forest Service who have had to move to their other campus. And one of the things that they miss the most is being downtown, is the shorter commutes, and is being engaged in all that's happening in downtown. And I think that if we ask that to our staff, they would probably say the same thing if they had to move somewhere outside of downtown in order to meet the growing needs that we have for staff. They would prefer to be within the core of the city. And lastly, I think that having both city and county staff under the same roof can be a really valuable way to better collaborate and interact and make some collaborate decisions on things that might require right now having to set up some more meetings and whatnot. So I really appreciate that. So my full support on this, and thank you again to everyone who's worked so diligently to bring all this information to us.
Thank you. Ms. Basika.
Thanks, and I really appreciate the thorough presentation on this. I do support this motion. We are growing tremendously as a city. Every day, more and more people come in, and it's wonderful. And we need more space for, like everyone mentioned, municipal activities. So I do support this motion. I would prefer us to sell off current assets that are no longer needed to fund this mechanism instead of taking on more debt. But we can cross that bridge when we get there. But I am in support of this motion.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have a question for Mr. Bickle, and and I know the motion on the floor is to allow the mayor to move forward with the application, but I do realize that if we get approved, it will trigger a series of events after that. And you mentioned, right, obviously we have to take the first step in a long sequence of events of figuring out kind of the funding package, but you mentioned that there was ARPA funding opportunities. And I guess that perked my ears because I know that those are one-time dollars. So, to Mr. Adams' point of, doing nothing really isn't an option, but there also seems to be sort of an interesting dynamic that there's opportunities to use some of that ARPA money, which is just available to us now, won't be available to us in 5 years. So that would sort of kind of lend nicely to pursuing this avenue right now versus sometime in the future.
Great question. So ARPA is indeed one-time dollars, and these capital funds are largely one-time expenses. So it would be a good use. I want to point out that the direct eligibility of ARPA is really narrow related to the federal building investment. So it would be, I don't imagine that we would have a substantial portion of ARPA, but there is some opportunities to get some of the ARPA funding in, particularly related to HVAC and ventilation systems. And then while ARPA, the city is receiving $14 million over the next 2 years. We have until December 2024 to commit it, and then through 2026 to spend it. So we do have the opportunity to use ARPA dollars for this funding to the extent it's eligible.
Great. Thanks so much for that. Can I comment, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
So thanks for that. And I just wanted to highlight, I know that when I saw the original number on this, it's not an insignificant amount of money. And we have multiple competing priorities in our community, but growth and public service and providing space for our constituencies and the daily function of city government is incredibly important. And I think it's important to also highlight that this money, we are spending money already to house our city staff to provide these services. So this is not all a new expenditure. And so I don't want it to be portrayed that way. Doing nothing isn't really an option. Our community is growing. Our community is growing even more rapidly, I would think, because of COVID and because of this kind of synergy between ARPA funding and a whole other variety of options to fund this. I think it's the best time to move forward with this, especially not wanting to lose this historic public asset that we have in our community. So it does sort of seem like the stars are aligning on this one, and I'm excited to move forward and know that we'll have to have some tough conversations about funding. But I think we are prepared to do that and have lots of different tools, as Mr. Bickle said, in our tool chest to move forward with this, and we'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. I don't see any other raised hands. The motion is in order. We've had public comment. I will just add my 2 cents. This has been a proposal that's been evaluated for several years now, and I've been paying attention to it. At the same time, I have seen before my very eyes our need for space. As our need has grown and we continue to lease additional space and make it work and do small remodels to make it work, and put more and more people into City Hall and subdivide cubicles, we clearly have a need, and that need has been heightened by COVID. So this solution, which we've been contemplating for a period of time now, is great. And to have it be free is fantastic. To have this building offered up for free, and then frankly to have it be such an incredibly beautiful building, it's just a win-win-win on so many levels. So whatever we do, it's going to cost money in the future, and I think with a lot of careful attention paid to this and the careful analysis, it's clear that this is going to be the most cost-effective route, and that will be an ongoing project. So I think we're going to have to pursue that. But for right now, we're positioned well, and I don't envy you your job, Dale, finding the money, but that's what you're good at. Glad I'm not in charge of that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John Adams, Lee Griffin, everyone that has, Dale, everyone that's put a lot of time into this. And thank you, Linda and John, for the public comment. It is much appreciated, your view on downtown and the value of this building. So without seeing any other hands raised, we will have a roll call vote, Lisa, on the 2 motions that are on the table. And I believe we can do those 2 motions. Mr. Von Lossberg, we can do them with one vote, I believe.
Yep. And my motion included both of them.
Okay. All right. Excuse me. Stacy Anderson.
Yes.
Mirta Becerra.
Yes.
John Contos.
Yes.
Jordan Hess.
Yes.
Gwen Jones.
Yes.
Julie Merritt. Oh, Julie's not here today. Sorry about that. Amber Sherrill.
Yes.
Sandra Vasika.
Yes.
Brian Von Lossberg.
Yes.
Heidi West.
Yes.
So that's unanimous for all 9 council members who are attending.
Thank you. That can go onto the consent agenda. And I look forward to the next pieces that you roll out on this entire project. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentations this morning. And that is the end of our agenda. So we will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.